Hi Founder fans, Jason here, and today we'll be discussing James Tilton and his attempts at modernizing military medicine during the American Revolution. That is a mouthful, but let's get to it. James Tilton was a young physician when the Revolutionary War broke out, so he signed up with his local militia and became the regiment's surgeon. Now he quickly came to the attention of the Continental Congress, who appointed him director of several hospitals. While he was director, he did a few things that were forward-thinking for the time. First of all, the Continental Congress had him offer vaccinations to certain Virginia troops, which vaccinations had been around for a while, but they were still a little bit controversial, especially with the Army mandating them. But smallpox was such a problem that this was the best solution. Even more interesting is James Tilton started putting patients into well-ventilated 8-bed cabins. And this was done to separate people so that disease wouldn't spread as fast, and also to help with sterilization. And germ theory wasn't around yet. They didn't know about germs, but they knew that keeping people separate seemed to work. At least some people knew that, and this was a very forward-thinking thing to do. So Tilton goes about his career, the war ends, and then Tilton actually ends up going and serving in the Delaware House of Representatives, and the House of Representatives in Delaware ends up sending him for 2 years to be a Continental Congressman. This was during the 1780s, where the Continental Congress wasn't really getting much done, but still, he served on the national stage. From there, he seems to have retired to private medicine, although at one point he writes a book, and it's a long title, I have to read it. It's called Economical Observations on Military Hospitals and the Prevention and Cure of Disease Incident to an Army. And this wordy title was a book about how to keep an army healthy. And he actually dedicated it to Secretary of War John Armstrong. And this kind of put him on the map as far as military doctors went. So, shortly thereafter, when the War of 1812 breaks out, James Tilton is appointed as Physician and Surgeon General of the Army, and he was in charge of all the hospitals. Unlike the Revolutionary War, where he was given one hospital at a time, suddenly he was in charge of all the hospitals. And he started putting a lot of his things he had learned into practice. He really emphasized sterilization, which again, we wouldn't learn about germ theory. I believe, I'm not an expert in germs, but I believe until at least the mid, if not to the mid to late, 18th century, and this is the very beginning of the 18th century. But he might not have known why it was working, but he did know that sterilization and keeping sick patients away from each other did seem to work. Now, after the War of 1812, he goes into retirement, but James Tilton writes one more book titled Regulations for the Medical Department. And Regulations for the Medical Department wasn't so much a book, but a manual as how to be in charge of the United States Army's hospitals. And for several decades, this book that James Tilton, who most of us don't know about, this was the main book that was used when running the hospitals for the United States Army. So I do want to recommend, there's a fascinating book called Medicine in the American Revolution, with the subtitle How Diseases and Their Treatments Affected the Colonial Army. It's by Oscar Reese, and it is a fascinating book. It goes into real detail about sickness in the Continental Army, and sickness played a humongous role. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I know a huge percentage of the deaths in the Revolutionary War were due to sickness, most notably smallpox. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, there are arguments to be made that more people may have died from disease than died on the battlefield. So, I highly recommend the book. I'll put a link down in the description below. I hope you read it. I hope you enjoy it. Please comment and let me know what you think. My name is Jason. I will let you go, and I will be back with another video for you tomorrow.